Okay, I think we can start. Hello, welcome everyone to the panel on investigative journalism in the Visegrad region and Western Balkan countries. The panel is supported by the Visegrad Fund. So let me introduce our great panelists who will soon share with us some cases of replicable and impactful cross-border investigations they were working on in the last months. So we have Bojana Jovanović, who is deputy editor of KRIK from Serbia, and Jovo. Hi, Bojana, and Jovo Martinović, director of Lupa from Montenegro, and we have Márton Sarkadi Nagy, freelance. No, okay. Do you want? Yeah, I'm still working on my Hungarian. It takes me already like years, and there is no sign of improvement so far. But we know each other with Márton for years as well, so he always forgives me.
You're actually pretty talented in Hungarian. It's nice being here. Thank you.
Thank you. So Márton is now working with Radio Free Europe in Hungary as investigative reporter and freelancer. Previously worked with Atlazo and also Visegrad. And we have Tomáš Madlenak as well from Investigative Center of Jan Kuciak, who is an investigative reporter. They're working on ICJK stories and also contributing to our Visegrad network and Visegrad platform, which is a cross-outlet covering cross-border investigations from the Visegrad region. So that said, we will start with learning more about some cases that will be shared by our panelists, and then we will elaborate more on our journalistic strategies, collaborations, and of course the impact of our investigations, or the lack of impact in some cases, I guess. And then we'll have time for the Q&A session. So please prepare some challenging questions for our discussion. So let's start with Bojana. I think KRIK participated in the global investigative project called Swiss Secrets. Would you like to tell us more about the project and stories you published?
Yeah. Thank you. Swiss Secrets was a project that we worked on last year. So the stories were published last year. And it was a global, like really big project in which almost 50 media were involved. And KRIK is investigative media from Serbia, but we are also members of OCCRP, Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. Maybe you heard about it. So through OCCRP, actually, we have a chance and opportunity to work on such huge international projects, such Swiss Secret was. Swiss Secrets was a project about the bank accounts of people who had accounts in the Credit Suisse bank. And those documents, actually, the data about those accounts were leaked to the journalists. So journalists from Süddeutsche Zeitung actually got the data, and they shared it with OCCRP. So all the partners and member centers of OCCRP were involved in the project. KRIK is basically, so we are based in Serbia, and what we did, we actually looked up for Serbian citizens and Serbian people in those data. And the data, what was in the data actually? So in the data we could see the information about holders of the bank accounts. We could see when the bank account was open or closed, how much money was on those accounts. And we could kind of track, through the time, if there was some money coming to the bank accounts and, going off the accounts. It was important. Why is this project important? I would, so later I will say what we found out actually. So the project actually was important because this was the first of such journalistic projects and investigations, because we know that bank accounts, that data, information about bank accounts are like really secret, especially when it comes to Switzerland. So a lot of people choose Switzerland because of these secrecy laws related to the finance and banks, to put their money there. You know, like they know that their money is secure and they know that they are kind of protected by law. So it's really a good way of hiding money, and maybe even, you know, use those banks to eventually launder some money, you know, to hide some money that is coming from corruption or from some organized crime. So this was the first leak that actually could give us some information that we could never have get, you know, like information about bank accounts and about money. So that's why it was really important, and not just for Serbia, of course, but internationally. So what we did, actually, we got data related to Serbian citizens. So our job was to see who those people are and to try to figure where the money came from. Actually, the money on their accounts. It's challenging, you know, to do such thing, but we actually found out some interesting, interesting data and interesting people. So, for example, we found out that several public officials had bank accounts in Switzerland, and they had a lot of money in that accounts while they were on public position. So, you know, the origin of money was unknown, and they never explained where the money came from, because with their salaries as public officials, they couldn't save so much money and save it in Switzerland especially. Another interesting information was that they didn't declare the money to the anti-corruption agency, although they needed to do this by Serbian laws. And none of them wanted to talk with us, with journalists, to explain, you know, how did they get this money? Why did they choose Switzerland? Because in Serbia we have this really old law that Serbian citizens cannot have bank accounts somewhere abroad in foreign countries. So I think it's from communist era, law. So if you want to have a bank account somewhere abroad, you need to have the permit from the national bank. So we found out that those people never asked National Bank for permits. So they'll kind of, you know, do it on their own, just open the accounts. And of course, since the Serbia is really struggling with democracy, now, nobody actually nobody cared about this, and nobody investigated this. Also, one important name that popped up was one of the mafia bosses. His name is Rodoljub Radulović, and he was one of the main people, the leader of the organization that did cocaine smuggling for years from South America to Europe. And they were indicted. He is actually convicted now in Serbia for cocaine smuggling, but also for money laundering. There is an ongoing case that is related to the cocaine smuggling. So we found out that he was piling up money on these bank accounts while he was doing the smuggling of drugs. So probably, you know, it was the money that was coming from from cocaine. And prosecution in Serbia actually initiated the investigation against him because they suspected that this money was actually cocaine money. Unfortunately, the investigation is standing at the beginnings. It's not moving forward. But anyway, we found out that the prosecution didn't know about some other bank account he had, because he holded 2 accounts. So it's also something that was important at that time, because the prosecution actually could, look into this, because it was something new. So to wrap up, because we are like short on time, basically the project was really important, and we found out also like shady businessmen that they are also using Swiss banks for hiding money. Unfortunately, we didn't have like somebody from the government. Probably they are using proxies.
Maybe luckily, not unfortunately.
Yeah, because probably they are using proxies, and they are smart enough not to do anything like anymore in their name. But it was a really big thing, because it opened like a new sphere, like the project in total, and it was really important, not just for Serbia, but because those information are really hard to get, and you need to verify them. Like, we worked for months just on verifying the information, and you need to be cautious when it comes to private data, because when there are such leaks, it's not just about the public people, like public officials and people who are, who should be investigated, but also some private people who are not, you don't need to investigate them, etc. But it was also interesting that we found out that one judge Serbian was holding the account there with like €500,000, which is like really a lot of money for Serbia.
Thank you, Bojana, for introducing us to this great investigation, and congratulations on this work. I think we will dig into more like patterns emerging from this project after all the cases we will discuss. When you said about shady businesses and mafia, my thoughts immediately were traveling to Slovakia. No offense, Thomas. But you have just published a new cross-border investigation on shell companies linked to a profitable healthcare business of Penta, and I think one of your favorite character, Norbert Bodor. For those of us who didn't hear this name, it's a Slovak oligarch, and I strongly encourage to check ICJ and Visegrad websites to learn more about Bodor, because it's not the first story you publish on him. So tell us more now too, like why this guy is important. Is he a friend of Marian Kočner, perhaps?
It's Bodor. It's a Hungarian name as well.
Oh no!
Of course it is.
My poor Hungarian. Yeah.
Is he a friend of Marian Kočner? I think it's a good place to start. I'm looking at the audience. I have a fleeting feeling that maybe not every one of you knows who Marian Kočner is. Is that true?
I think it's good to explain.
I see a lot of nods. All right, so I started my timer not to go over time. And, okay. Marian Kočner is a thug who is currently sitting in Slovak jail because he was trying to steal, I think, over 60 million from an American company using very stupid fraud. He just faked some kind of promissory notes that said that the company owes him money. And when the first time he went to the court decided in his favor, even though it was very obvious that this is fraud. The reason why the court for the first time decided in his favor and said to the American company that they need to pay up is because Marian Kočner had an enormous amount of influence over Slovak politics and especially judiciary. Marian Kočner is also a person who has, according to the investigators and prosecutors, because the court has not finished yet, so as not to be sued, I have to say it like this, but also based on my own understanding of the case, and because I have read and seen all the 16,000 pages of the police file on this, he is a person who has ordered a murder of a Slovak investigative journalist, Jan Kuciak. So this is Marian Kočner. And Marian Kočner had a very nice and fruitful conversation using encrypted apps in his phone with another guy whose name is Norbert Böder. Norbert Böder is another Slovak oligarch who, according to prosecutors and blah, 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 was, if you can believe it, even more powerful. Now, in 2020, we wrote a series of articles about Norbert Böder. If you can, maybe I should have prepared some pictures.
Well, I told you, but now it's too late.
Yeah, but I was working on the article until yesterday, until 11 p.m. You know how it is.
The story will be so interesting that everyone will check it out.
Norbert Böder is a kind of guy who used to be a trainer of an MMA fighter. All right, and now you have the picture. Nobody in Slovakia thought that this guy is an oligarch. Everybody thought that his father is an oligarch because he had a very nice and close relationship to the governing party Smer. Then in 2020, and especially after the Jan Kuciak murder, we found out a lot about his son, Norbert. And it turns out he is not unintelligent. He's quite crafty. And he has been making a lot of money, and we have done an extremely complicated but very good investigation about the shell companies around him, and only one name of the shell company I'm going to bother you with. Its name was Saxian. It was based in Cyprus. Nobody knew or admitted to owning it, but we have been able to prove that Norbert Böder was able to pull out millions out of there, and then he reinvested it, and all in all, it was about 30 to 40 million euros just via this one specific Cypriot shell company, all right? The source of the money we were not able to prove, but Norbert Böder is nowadays charged with extremely volatile cases of corruption, basically misusing the public funds connected to the European agricultural policy, and also he is charged for leading a criminal organization which included then president of the police force in Slovakia. So he was an oligarch who was instructing the police president and others. So that's what we did in 2020, and now another story. And I promise they will join very soon. So in 2017, a Polish citizen, and I'm going to flaunt how good I can pronounce Polish, Przemysław Nieożyła.
Very well.
Thank you. Mr. Nieożyła started a bank. Well, he started appearing as a president of a bank. The bank's name was Custos Trust. And until today, if you type it in Google, you can find old PR articles in these stupid journals for rich people where they were promising that, oh, if you put your money with us, we are based in United Arab Emirates, and nobody is going to be able to trace your money, and we will put it through shell companies in I don't know where, like British Virgin Islands or whatever. And even if the bank authorities or the police come knocking at our door, we will not cooperate with them, which is a load of nonsense. You just cannot possibly operate a bank within European Union, of all places, and claim that you will do this kind of things. Like this goes against every rule against money laundering and terrorist financing, right? Well, if you feel like it's kind of weird that this kind of bank existed and it was Arab but also had a Polish owner, well, it sounds like bullshit because it is. So in 2018, Mr. Nieożyła was arrested in Netherlands because he was using a fake passport. And as the Dutch investigators found out, among other things, they found a lot of fake stuff with him, including a fake gun. But they also found out that his bank is fake. In fact, it was not a super rich person's bank from United Arab Emirates. It was just a normal INC based in Prague, Czech Republic. And despite the fact that it sounds very strange, and I personally would not send a euro into such a bank, 4.2 million euros were actually on those accounts. And out of those 4.2 millions, 4 millions were sent there by Saxian. Now, this has been going for a long time. Mr. Jovo has been found guilty in Netherlands. He has been given 30 months in prison, but then he was released because he already served 2/3. The interesting part that we have been digging into now was that when he was found guilty, the Dutch state decided that the money that is on those accounts of a fake bank is very strange indeed as well, and who in their right mind would send the money there if they were not dirty. And therefore the Dutch state decided to forfeit the money. They are now owned by Netherlands. Switch forward 3 years until like 2 months ago, Saxian's lawyer shows up and starts claiming the money is ours. It is my company, Saxian, is owned by another fund from Liechtenstein, blah, 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 whatever. And it is owned by Bodor family from Slovakia. So for the first time, they have admitted to this. And I'm going to stop here. The story is very interesting, even though very often, as fellow journalists, many of you, I think, understand these stories when it comes to money laundering and different money schemes, they tend to be kind of boring, right? By this time, I think it's very interesting, not only because of the fake bank, which is a juicy story in itself, but also because we were able to then trace the exact dates when these money movements were happening in 2018, and it looks like it might have something to do with the way oligarchs were able to purchase the biggest Slovak tabloid newspaper called Nový čas. And it's also a very interesting discussion we could have later, whether it is possible and good to consider cooperating even with tabloids, because back in 2020, when we were working on the first set of stories on Norbert Bodor, we were cooperating, among others, also with reporters from Nový čas. The story is just in Slovak for now. On our website, it's EK. So if you read Slovak, that's great. If you don't, I think it will shortly appear on VSquare as well in English.
It will for sure.
And use Google Translate, as I did with a lot of stuff from Netherlands.
Yeah, but it will for sure will appear on VSquare. So now, like traveling across borders in the region, like broader region, let's travel to Montenegro and to Jovo, who will tell us a little bit more about his case, which is a cross-border project by Montenegrin Crime and Corruption Reporting Network, Lupa, and 444.hu, which is, of course, one of the very few Hungarian outlets not controlled by Viktor Orban. So, like, what did you investigate together and how it all started?
We discovered years ago online gambling business in Montenegro, which is a haven of, labeled as a haven of organized crime, and a country that had autocratic president for 3 decades, Milo Đukanović. He and his family effectively ruled the entire country. They ruled the institutions, the judiciary, every aspect of life. And he also managed to attract a lot of investors in terms of international crime syndicates who develop businesses. So online gambling is one of the handy things for money laundering and for covering all kinds of things. So we discovered already back in 2015 a company called e-Gambling Montenegro, which had a huge number of gambling sites. By law, per one license, you can have only one website. Nevertheless, that company had 35 websites. It wasn't paying any concession fee to the gambling authority, and the company itself started selling licenses apart from the gambling authority to many worldly known casinos, well, especially in Asia. So we teamed up with Hungarian 444.hu because we discovered that the e-gambling Montenegro company was owned by a Seychelles-based company of deputy director of Hungarian OTP Bank, which is the largest bank in Hungary, and by another BVI company, British Virgin Islands company, which was owned by the first cousin of our beloved president. And the legal representative of that company was none other than the president's sister. So those guys teamed up and effectively took over the business of the gambling authority in the country, hence issuing licenses all over the world, and the state budget received hardly any money from that. I mean, it all went to private pockets. And director of that company was another Hungarian national, who was, it took us some time to track down the records, I mean, digging through various companies that were used as a proxy. And when the chairman of the gambling authority in Montenegro realized that something was wrong, because there were turnovers of tens of millions of euros and hundreds of millions of euros, and there was no revenue to the state budget at all. So when the man who was honest realized that something was going on, he reported all to the special prosecution office and to the police, and they came to allegedly investigate. The investigation was more like a facade, just, you know, taking questions and answers and stating the situation. Nevertheless, even though by law the company was not allowed to issue gambling licenses all over the world, they continued to do unopposed, I mean, despite reporting to the police and the prosecutors. What's interesting is that Montenegro has a very suitable domain. It's .me. So, I mean, when you buy a website, you can combine anything you want, like gamble me, pay me, love me, whatsoever. And that's enough, you know, for generating a lot of money besides online betting. And one of the companies that bought the license for online betting was Fun88King.com. It's an Asia-based company. It's known for that many sports stars were ambassadors and promoters of that company. For example, Kobe Bryant was the ambassador of Fun88. Former NBA player Steve Nash. That website is a sponsor to Newcastle United football club in England, Premier League. And there were many illustrious names in that circle. And they were all operating around the world on, let's say, counterfeit or illegal gambling licenses from Montenegro. After some noise was made in 2019, I mean, the chairman of the gambling authority made noise. After less than a year, he was sacked by the government. And it appeared in the media. I mean, some reports appeared in the media, and this company, eGambling Montenegro, decided to close down in February 2020. I mean, it was shut down in the corporate register. Nevertheless, I mean, the company, despite being shut down, continued to issue gambling licenses all over the world. And it was backed by Montenegrin diplomats and the government, just circumventing all the institutions. And then they moved the company to London. They just dropped the name of Montenegro. It was just iGambling, from e-gambling to iGambling, and the same Hungarian CEO continued to operate, and the OTP Bank deputy director continued with his ownership. So all the appeals to the authorities, I mean, judiciary was captured. At that time, prosecutors were nothing more than puppets of that government. It made no impact until the government was changed in August 2020, and it was the first change of government since 1945. I mean, it was basically renamed communists. Just now, I mean, after our writing and after we got European Commission's third award for investigative journalism, it appeared that the British authorities and all others started to check, basically drive back and see the origin of those licenses and whether they were issued illegally or not. And it just, over the last year, we've seen some action. Hungarian prosecutors responded as well, but so far we haven't seen results. I mean, again, Hungary is another case of state capture in Europe, unfortunately. But we were able to trace more than 100 various companies that operated around the world, including Malbet, which is based in northern Turkish-controlled Cyprus. Those companies operate all over the world, and they all operate, I mean, the turnovers are hundreds of millions and billions of euros and dollars, and they all operate based on those licenses issued by Montenegrin not authority, but the first cousin of the former president. So, like, you know, it's my private state, so I can do whatever I want. And during the investigation and during digging through the corporate register, our journalists were under surveillance. I mean, we couldn't feel that because we deliberately used ordinary phone lines discussing the work and where to go and so on, and we could feel, I mean, it was kind of a test using ordinary phone line just to see whether you will be surprised somewhere. And wherever we went or applied for, I mean, to see the permits, the licenses and so on, I mean, people were already prepared beforehand. And the funny thing is, I mean, all these, more than 100 companies, by Montenegrin law, they must have an office in the country and must have a local CEO. So we tracked down probably a dozen of those addresses, I mean offices and CEOs, and all of them tend to be fictive. And we discovered one CEO that was an 84-year-old lady whose identity had been stolen. So she was just put up as a CEO of one of the gambling companies. So for the time being, we think at least that we have raised a lot of noise in order to prevent further illegalities and of course, I mean, the anti-money laundering agencies, both in Hungary and in Montenegro and all over Europe, should pay attention because the turnovers are just enormous.
Such an impressive work, and congrats on the award, of course. And I think, like, if anyone would like to see the documentary you made, it's also with English subtitles, right? So, so definitely worth checking. And speaking of Hungary, and as you said, Jovo, captured state. I think Márton has quite a lot to tell us about it, and he will walk us through the story of Hungarian money and Russian influence behind a campaign for the Hungarian minority in Romania. And yeah, so how this investigation began, and this is B-Square website just after the visual relaunch recently. Last week we did relaunch our website, so you can also subscribe to the newsletter. Well, Márton is preparing his presentation. Yeah.
I would like to take you back 2 years when I was still working for Átlátszó.hu, a Hungarian investigative reporting NGO. I hope some of you know it. At least one of my former colleagues is sitting somewhere in these chairs. I've put up the title of the story so you can check it out if you're interested. It appeared originally in Hungarian on Átlátszó, but it's also on We Square in English, and it concerns Russian influence and a campaign for Hungarian minority in Romania. But this is not the only story I would be telling you about, but also I'm not sure what I just pushed. Yeah, this should work now. Well, this is the story that the other story grew out of, termed Hungarian Money, and which was an investigative collaboration by 5 or 6 investigative reporting centers, including Átlátszó in Hungary and other countries around Hungary with significant Hungarian minorities. I'm including this story because I was told that you would be interested in practical tips and quirks in collaborative reporting, and well, it's sort of interesting how a leftover, basically, of this story served as the basis for our investigation. To understand the original collaboration, you should know that there is a Hungarian state fund that practically disburses money for various projects in places where Hungarian communities live outside of Hungary. Some of those funds are for, I know, folk dance groups or renovating kindergartens, which I believe to be reasonable enough. Some of those go for stadium building projects or to associations and other organizations connected to politicians in other countries, which are less than reasonable, in my opinion. And the Hungarian Money project tried to map those. I was not involved in that project, but luckily enough, the data that they collected on those funds sent to these countries, well, I could access. Because at the time I was working at an intern at Átlátszó, and as a training exercise, I taught her to go to that table, update it, and see if there's anything interesting that maybe wasn't looked at in detail already. And she came back with a funny company name. And looking at the company, we understood that we might actually have something on our hands. The person up on the slide is László Pesti. You wouldn't know him, but Hungarians would know him. Why is that? That is because he's an iconic character of the era of the transition to democracy. This picture also shows László Pesti some 30 years ago now. He's the one with the camera on. Anybody recognizes the place where the picture was took? Yeah, Prague. It's in Wenceslas Square. During the era of transition to democracy, a bunch of Hungarian politicians, or later politicians from Fidesz, the governing party, now traveled to Prague to support a democratic protest, and some of them was jailed. Also, László Pesti was jailed because at the time he was working as a cameraman for a documentary filmmaking initiative, and this picture with you know, with a young democratic guy throwing his camera with the recordings inside while being taken away by the policeman was able to move the imagination of people. And Pesti obviously made friends with loads of Fidesz people, including Viktor Orbán, during these times. And for that reason, he was able to secure this company we found, and which is connected to Pesti, from the government and from that state fund that the project Hungarian Money was looking at. This slide shows the particular announcement by a state secretary sitting next to László Pesti, announcing that this company is receiving about 2 million euros for a campaign to support what is basically a signature collection initiative in Europe. The point of which, amongst others, is to somehow help the Hungarians in Romania. You might not know about European citizen or civic initiatives. It is not a well-known tool. It is not, very much useful tool. It mainly stipulates that if you collect 1 million signatures in any EU countries and cross a certain threshold in at least 7 countries, then the European Commission has to at least talk a bit about your particular thing. In this case, the particular thing was that certain regions maybe could access EU funds directly. The point was that maybe Hungarians in Romania could access EU funds directly. The company connected to Pesti spent this money in 2 ways. They waged a social media campaign both in Hungary and around Europe, and Pesti himself, with a number of his close partners, traveled around Europe to gather support in other areas where they hope to cross the signature threshold. Those areas obviously included places where ethnic minorities live. But from the start, Pesti said that he was going to leave out the Baltic states and the Russian minorities from that signature collecting initiative. It happened between 22 and 2021, which brought us much surprise when we seen this picture. You can see Pesti in the cap with the writing on it, and while they are standing in Riga, Latvia, where they apparently collected all the signatures needed for their initiative. I mean, we were much surprised when we saw this, because Pesti said that they weren't going to campaign in Latvia because they were going to respect the historical sensibilities in the Baltics towards Russian minorities. Why the change? Well, the change, as we found out, is because of the other guy in the cap on the right side of the picture, cap and glasses. Let me talk a little bit about him as well. Name is Szilárd Kiss. He's somewhat infamous in Hungary. He used to be an agricultural attaché at the embassy to Moscow during 2011 to 2013. And he was able to work as a Hungarian diplomat in Moscow, even though he failed his national security screening twice. What does that mean exactly? I do not know what that means exactly. The Hungarian secret services know, and the people sitting in a particular parliamentary committee overseeing those secret services know, but I do not know it because it is classified. But one member of that parliamentary committee told me in no uncertain terms that László Kiss poses a national security risk to Hungarians. So go figure. What we also know about László Kiss is that his wine trading company was behind a so-called visa factory that invited hundreds of Russian people, including organized criminals and prostitutes and their ilk, to Hungary, and therefore granted them visas to the Schengen area as well. Now, as László Pesti told us when we asked him about László Kiss, is that they have been actually friends for 30 years. And we've also found out that it was him that tried to steer this whole campaign initiative towards Russian minorities in Europe. And apparently he also succeeded. We also know that, that they traveled to Moscow several times to gather some sort of a political support for the initiative, which brings us to several questions regarding this whole thing. Apparently, the Latvian signature collection didn't succeed because the Latvian state disqualified just enough of the signatures collected for the initiative so that it would not cross the threshold needed. And, well, if you think about the motivations of the Latvian state, you can have some ideas. We were able to map, through our investigation, a money trail from the Hungarian State Fund through Pesti's company, guided by a certain Latvian Russian party to various disinformation websites that various security services around the Baltics classify as to be serving Russian state interests. So there's that. Pesti László also told us when we talked to him that he heard a rumor that we've also heard from other people we've talked to, and that is that a different signature collection initiative somehow connected to Hungarians in Romania was also disregarded by the European Commission because the EC believed that some sort of Russian influence was behind it. And that brings us to the final and unanswered questions of our reporting, which is, why would László Pesti employ this other László Kiss if he wanted this initiative to succeed? So there's that. And to the practical tips on investigations. I've told you that we found this, this leftover story idea from the Hungarian money project data. We've actually found it in a part of the data that no one cared to look at because the setup of the investigation, as far as I know, I wouldn't presume, I mean, Tomáš, I think ICJK was involved in the investigation, but the point was that each national organization only looked at the data which pertained to their country. And therefore, no one looked at the funds that were sent to Hungarian companies and from there went to foreign countries. Also, no one looked at the money sent to countries not directly bordering Hungary. I think particularly big sums were spent in Italy and Brazil and places like that. Well, the first thing is that it's great that we have investigative collaborative networks. While working on the second story, we've had help from Fundacja and OCCRP. And first of all, we had the data because of an investigative collaborative project. So that's great. Another thing is that it's probably useful to go back to these projects, try and update them, try and look for leftovers, because if you collected the data in the first place, that might just be reused again, and you can always find good leftovers and story ideas in there. And the very practical tip is that maybe if you start with a data collection, data scraping, whatever thing as the first phase of your project, that you maybe assign someone to that data that does not directly pertain to any of the nationalities in the partaking centers. Thank you.
Thank you, Márton. We can say it's zero waste journalism, isn't it, in a way, starting with leftovers. Thank you for walking us through this project, and I think it really bridges us toward our discussion. I would actually start this discussion on practical tips and everything from the very end. So asking you guys about impact, which is a buzzword we need to discuss at so many layers and dimensions, but I would think of are we somehow just freaks, digging into millions of files for months, focusing on this all complicated, shell structure, scams, and so on, then exciting about the publications, and then there is what? So how we define this impact, and do you feel frustrated, actually? Bojana, you don't look like a frustrated person.
No, no. And I don't feel frustrated. Yeah, I mean, in Serbia, the situation is really bad because, whatever we do, whatever we discover and publish, we have no any reaction from the institutions. As Jovo said, they had captured state and captured institutions, but we have them currently, in Serbia. But that doesn't stop us from doing our job. So what we think that impact is changing, the first thing is to, giving the true information to the citizens. So citizens are informed of what's going on in the country. So that's the first thing. The second thing is also the institutions are captured now, and the state is in really bad state. I truly believe that it cannot be forever, so the change will come. We see in Montenegro, change has come. So, you know, what we are doing, we are like preserving evidence for some future investigation. So things will change, and probably, hopefully, some really brave prosecutor will start doing his or her job, and he will start from our investigations. So it's like on two levels, like the impact we are seeing now, because, you know, we keep citizens informed, and I think that's really important, so they know what the government is doing. And on the other hand, when the situation changed, you know, the prosecution, the people who are ready to do the job will have all the evidences, you know, prepared for them, like to start doing the job.
So, Thomas, would you see it in a similar way with recent changes in Slovakia? Because I would say...
Yeah, I'm gonna get to that directly. I am frustrated.
That was what I would assume, actually, in your place.
I am frustrated because exactly, change can come. It did come in Slovakia, and for that change to come, somebody had to die. We need to do our jobs.
In this case, an investigative journalist,
Yeah.
actually.
We need to our jobs better so that people do not have to freaking die for the rest of the people to wake up. I'm also hopeful. I'm not only frustrated. I'm frustrated because the same people who were in the power when Jan Kuciak was murdered are in power once again in Slovakia right now, and all the moves they are undertaking right now show that they are probably going to try to replicate the state capture. We were actually in Slovakia quite clearly the masters of state capture, like, no offense, but in Serbia and in Balkans, people knew, or in Hungary, people knew that they are living in state capture. We did not even know. That's how good they were.
It's really serious competition here.
It is. But I wanted to get to other thing. Like, I am frustrated, but I'm also helpful that they will not succeed this time, because we have learned some things. And there's like two...
What were these lessons?
Yeah, there are like two very specific things that I would like to share with you. And they might seem controversial to you, especially if you are from like some high-end, good, established media. So the first one, I already kind of talked about it, is stop looking through your fingers at your colleagues from tabloids, because they might not be as super smart as you and able to do those beautiful investigations and follow the money, etc. But unlike us, they are able to write it in a way that the voters understand. That, by the way, also applies to televisions. Usually the TV format is not suitable for long-form journalism, such as most of us in the investigative field usually do, but their reach is enormous. And even in Slovakia, where we know the social media have a tremendous impact, when we, especially Facebook, when we did some actual surveys among the general population, like most of them would tell us, yes, I do get news, like 90% of them, like, yes, I am using also Facebook. But then when you ask them, like, and what is the source of reliable information for you if you are not sure about something? Still, most of them would say TV. You know, and I am of the generation, I don't even have a TV at home, but it's still true, you know. So TVs are extremely important. They have enormous reach. They are also, because they have to fit it in those 2-minute slots, they are able to say it in a way that we would never be able to say it. So that's the first thing. And then second thing, that might be even more controversial for many, is that you do not have to only cooperate across borders, you can cooperate within it as well. I know that we are competitors first and foremost, but it is possible. Just very shortly, when Jano was murdered, we were given this trove of data, basically when the whole police file on the Jan Kuciak murder. And the police file doesn't mean only scanned pages. It means also the digital images of the telephones, tablets, computers, everything. And so it was 70 terabytes of data, 70. It was impossible for us, even though I was not at the very beginning, but I know that this woman, she's actually from Czech Republic, leading the Czech Investigative Center in here, Pavla Holcova, she said it, that, well, the first instinct obviously was, oh, I'm gonna write so many beautiful stories with this, I'm gonna be famous. But then she realized it's better to share because we will be able to write more stories, better stories, and they will have much bigger impact. So we started this project that became known as Kočner's Library, and we wrote dozens of stories because it was really good data on very secret things of the people from within the power. And what was the most beautiful about it was that there were like 12 or 13 outlets, all from Slovakia, all of them competitors, you know, but every story, and no matter who found out this thing, you know, there were some computers, we were checking the data, and doesn't matter if it was me who found the recording of the Speaker of the Parliament having sexy talks with a murderess, or it was somebody else, we would all publish at the same day, at the same time, together. And suddenly from a story which had potential of tens or hundreds of thousands of views and clicks, it was millions.
I think for anyone who didn't see the documentary, The Killing of a Journalist, that actually covers exactly everything that Tomasz just said, including these rooms, like closed rooms where journalists could share data. I strongly recommend to watch. Jovo, do you think like TV, you know, ways of telling our complicated stories on shell companies and everything is the way to actually have better impact? And like, what are your lessons from frustrations or no frustration?
Well, I mean, when it comes to frustrations or personal experience, the thing is, you just work in public interest, and of course, I mean, all of us would love to see results. I mean, immediately upon release. And, you know, to see prosecutors calling, or, I mean, whoever, and, you know, noise and all that stuff, but it takes time. It takes time. Unfortunately, we live in the age which is, I mean, ordinary people are swamped by information. And I think one of the ways, I mean, how the autocrats work in all these countries, Eastern countries, they just, you know, produce so many news, I mean, half fake or, you know, lies, and somehow mingle with all what we do. And it takes time. I mean, it must kind of sink into people's brain, I mean, to realize what is going on and what is true. But it's our duty, I mean, to persevere and do as much as we can. And the results will come sooner or later. I mean, you never know.
Do you believe, Márton, that your investigations will contribute to this public accountability at some point in Hungary? That there will be a time that Orbán will be held accountable?
I am not sure if there will come a time where Viktor Orbán will be held accountable, but I would still like to second Jovo's point. Me as well as most of my peers in Hungary who started journalism under Viktor Orbán's rule and still do journalism under Viktor Orbán's rule, we very much like to complain. You know, it doesn't make a dent in Fidesz. It does not bring any sort of change or any sort of impact. And why are we doing this? Viktor Orbán loves his sovereignty. Viktor Orbán or his people would not be moved by any sort of newspaper articles, and so what's the point? But the thing is that Viktor Orbán likes one more thing better than his sovereignty, and that is the image of his sovereignty. In my experience is that several times my reporting or the reporting of others actually made impact, actually made changes, even in various policies or initiatives by Orbán or Fidesz. But it was in their interest not to make their change of policy obvious, but the impact was still there. Impact does not necessarily have to be either immediate or obvious or visible. And I'm going to underline that point with the example of this story I just told you about. The epilogue of the story is that it did not have any sort of public impact. There is a particular reason for that, and that is that sadly the publication of the story coincided with Russia invading Ukraine, and newsreaders were obviously paid more attention to that. But fast forward 1.5 years. This summer, László Pesti, the main character in our story, started going around independent government-critical newspapers and granted interviews to nearly all of them. And in his interviews, he criticized the government repeatedly. The reason for his dissatisfaction is apparently that he wanted to make a film out of 5 million euros, and the government agency responsible denied him that money. And I like to believe that our reporting had some role in that. I cannot know, obviously.
Yeah, I promise after this I will be more quiet. But when you said that Viktor Orbán likes one thing more than his sovereignty, what actually came to my mind is money. That's what they like the most. They like the money, and especially if it's not the money out of their own pocket, you know, the state, because they have to run the state, so you can only steal so much. But if it's European money, oh, that's sweet, right? So, and that's just exactly why I believe another thing we must do is actually collaborate more across the borders, even though I just told you to collaborate within the borders, so that
simultaneously.
so that they cannot hide and they cannot act in one way at home and another way in Brussels, because that's what they always do. We cannot let them do this. Again, we have to go to conferences such as this, speak in English about it, write articles in English, so that they are held accountable on the international level as well.
Thank
I would
you.
just like to add that what we may notice is that they became smarter, and more cautious, because when we publish something and investigate something, for example, when we found out that our current Minister of Finance is behind offshore company and which has 24 apartments in Bulgaria, I believe that our Minister of Finance will never be again by his name behind some offshore company. So that we are improving their skills also by reporting and investigating. It's like with the prosecutors, because prosecutors are always chasing the bad guys, and bad guys are always thinking of new ways how to how not to be catched. And then prosecutors are following, them. And I think that's the same thing here we are doing, because sometimes they really, change the way they're working just because we already published stories about it and we discovered that.
Kind of like a mutual dynamic, because we are also getting more and more creative in a way of figuring out how they might operate.
Exactly.
So I think there is still, we could discuss for hours, I believe. I have many questions, but I'm sure we also have some questions from our great colleagues and audience, so let's switch immediately to that, and maybe this first one. So,
thanks. Christian from Stockholm University. Obviously, one of the elements of sort of authoritarian and populist politics has been framing journalism as activism against those in power. But what we're increasingly seeing, I'm from the United States originally, I grew up in Britain, is also the framing of the police and the legal system is also becoming part of this activist group against those in power. And then by association, we're beginning to see examples of people engaging in things like money laundering or offshore accounts as gaming the system. In other words, they're clever because what they're doing is they're not playing into the way in which the state tells us that we should be able to make money or have control over. I mean, a very good example of that would be like Nigel Farage in the UK, who had this case with Barclays Bank. And what happened was it was reversed. And what happened was he was made to look a hero in the face of large-scale financing power. And I think that, I'm just curious from the panel here, when you do investigations into, for example, financial crime or money laundering, are you seeing a tendency of this redefinition of financial crime as actually a positive thing? Because what it does is it says that people are smart enough to play outside the system, and that actually certain criminal activities are seen as things that win people votes in the long run, because that's definitely something that we're noticing. For example, Donald Trump actually openly said it in the 2016 campaign. They said, like, do you use these? He says, absolutely, I do these things because I'm a rich person. I use every means available to me to make as much money. That's something a candidate had never said before, and it actually made him more popular with populist voters.
Thank you for this remark. Jovo, would you like to start?
Well, when it comes to using the system, it's like, I think, cat and mouse chase. I mean, they learn from us and we learn from them. So it's, you know, who is quicker? I mean, who overtakes? And secondly, we came to a situation where, I mean, certain moral standards don't apply anymore. I mean, it's good, you know, it's supposed to mean being successful. I mean, I make money and I'm successful and, you know, I can get away with that. And some people love impunity of politicians or corporate managers. I mean, we can, you know, circumvent the system and still get away. So in terms of that, it's just like, you know, I mean, combat between police and criminals. I mean, the same in journalism. I mean, how quick are to learn new skills and to pursue the topics in public interest, of course.
I would add that what is also important, you know, to us as investigative journalism is to track the hypocrisy, because what it can be seen as a kind of pattern, as it was in Poland before the big change with the last election, was that quite often it were people in power who were actually benefiting of the system they were publicly criticizing. That was also like with, for example, you know, moving out money, like for the foreign, you know, institutions, like foreign banks, but also we had this visa scandal in Poland with migrants. So like the government was leading anti-migrant campaign when in the, you know, very meat of the political campaign, election campaigns, it turned out it was actually the government and the Polish MFA who in a way organized the scheme system of, you know, selling visas abroad. So this is like also something to track, I believe, like this hypocrisy of these guys. But we had another question, and then let's elaborate more on this, perhaps. Or Márton, you want to add?
Let me just add the one thing is that maybe now there is a high watermark for this sort of framing, but the framing itself is very old. Hey, I'm not a robber, I'm Robin Hood. It's very old, actually. And the other thing is that I do not believe in such a thing as a victimless crime. If there is a crime, there should be a victim somewhere. A journalist should be able to find that victim and show it to their readers. So there you go.
So now the next question.
Yeah, hi. My question is for Bojana regarding media in Serbia. We touched upon the topic of cross-border investigative journalism, and I feel like that outside of the efforts in Bern and the money coming from the EU to the Balkan Investigative Reporting Network, I feel like there's not many other examples of cross-border investigative journalism between Kosovo Albanian journalists and journalists in Serbia. I was wondering, because I feel like there's a need for transparency in these cases, like regarding, for example, the murder of Oliver Jovanović, or the fact that Milan Radojcic is still roaming free in Serbia. I feel like that the collaboration between Kosovo Albanian journalists and Serbian journalists will lead to more efficient investigations and combating disinformation in this field. So I was wondering whether if KRIK or any other independent media in Serbia has been on this issue.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I totally agree with you because collaboration would make we could investigate more and we could find out more if we would collaborate, with Serbia and Kosovo. Unfortunately, we didn't have so much collaboration like KRIK. I'm talking in KRIK's name, but that I think is going to change because now we are trying to find media outlets there with whom we can work together. And one of the media has also become the member of OCCRP. So that means that we will be part of the same network, which will definitely lead to better collaboration. And it's kind of difficult to do such stories because we don't have any previous connections. I mean, we don't have any, at KRIK, we don't have colleagues who we know very good from Kosovo. So actually that is something that needs to be changed, and especially with so many things happening now in Kosovo and that is related to Serbia. So luckily it's not going to be just Björn that is doing this job, that we will also do it. Yeah.
Thank you, Bojana. And we have time for the very last question, if there is any. Yep, please.
In the previous panel, we had an example from Blanca about how they've kind of figured out how that their fact-checking exercise didn't have enough impact by itself, and they needed to add some components to it. So they went into further investigation and then into media literacy. So in order to be able to kind of increase your impact, what other kind of components have you been thinking about of kind of enhancing further activities or maybe partnerships with others who can increase your impact? I mean, you're already talking about different ways of dissemination through TV or tabloids or something like that. But what other components can you add towards your activities to be able to increase impact?
Can I be first? Yeah, because I have the mic. What we are thinking about is to have a partner from civil society who will, for example, continue our work when we publish something. We need somebody, for example, to put charges or something like that. That's in Montenegro. There is this non-profit organization called MANS, and that's what they do. They do a little different kind of job because they also investigate, they write a story, they publish a story, but after that they are, putting legal pressure on the institutions to do their job. For example, in Serbia we don't have it, unfortunately, and we really hope that somebody will, be that kind of non-profit organization. Last example was with the Björn story, that there was a cooperation between investigative journalism media and non-profit, like civil organization, and they press some kind of press charges. Maybe it's not the best wording in English, but they did story together, and then they're putting pressure on the institutions. And I think that would be really great because, for example, in Serbia we don't have problem with other media republishing or collaboration. We are totally good with that, but this is something that would be really cool.
Anyone would like to add something?
Yeah. I'm not sure if I have any specific recommendations on increasing your impact, but there is one thing that I think is very crucial, and in Slovakia at least, we do not really have such a big problem as media in general. I'm not talking about our center, we can definitely improve in many ways, but as media in general, we do not have a problem with the numbers of clicks or reads or views. Our problem is that people do not trust us anymore. About 50% of Slovak population even if those narratives and stories from media reach them, they choose the disinformation instead, or they say some nonsense like, the truth is somewhere in the middle, you know, or something like that. So what we need to work on is that. Now, how to do that? Obviously, I could now start talking about critical thinking, education, blah, blah, blah. That's not our job, though. It's
very important.
Yeah, it's very important to keep track of actually what the first question was about, what you started with, the way how we are framed often as activists, and it's especially the case in Slovakia also, the law enforcement, the prosecutors, the judges, you know, the whole process of with all the oligarchs after Jan Kuciak murder, it's all being now swept away using this kind of rhetoric that they are all activists, the policemen are activists. And what we can do as ourselves as media is to make sure that we do not actually become activists, because I'm not sure if I can say we do have that kind of problem, but it's always a risk. And I know it might sound strange coming from me, since I am aware that during this panel I might have sounded quite activist. But it is important to be at least self-aware of that.
I can think about the better point, actually, and we are running out of time, although I think it's a super interesting, you know, issue and topic, so I think we can move these conversations around these challenges to the lunch break that we are now heading. So thank you so much for spending this time with us. And
thank you.